Futures. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Today, the FBI under fire and questioned over its motives as the Director of National Intelligence gets set to brief lawmakers on why the FBI raided the home of former President Donald Trump. Coming up, House Intelligence Committee ranking member and Ohio Congressman Mike Turner on what to expect as we analyze the heavily redacted affidavit behind that raid. Then the FBI works overtime to elect Joe Biden right before the 2020 election.
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump that's similar to that, so just be vigilant. And it turned out, after the fact, the fact checkers looked into it, no one was able to say it was false.
Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg admitting the censorship directive came from the FBI, as whistleblowers tell Senator Ron Johnson a similar story about the directive on Hunter Biden's laptop. Coming up, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson is here on what the whistleblowers told him and what he's doing about it. Then President Biden claims it's fair for all taxpayers to be on the hook for other people's college debt.
Well, I believe my plan is responsible and fair. It focuses the benefit on middle class and working families. It helps both current and future borrowers.
Coming up, Florida Congressman Byron Donalds on the policies that got us here to 40-year high inflation. And Joe Biden's efforts to keep stoking prices higher for everything, now including college. Plus 71 days to the midterm elections, and many Senate races are still a toss-up. Ohio Senate candidate J.D. Vance on why he's leading in the polls in Ohio. It's all right here, right now on Sunday Morning Futures. First, this morning, we begin this Sunday morning with the very latest on the FBI's heavily redacted affidavit being unsealed on Friday over the Bureau's unprecedented raid on President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. The affidavit states the Trump team turned over nearly 200 documents with classifications markings on it to the National Archives and Record Administration. Earlier this year, the FBI claimed it had probable cause to believe additional classified documents were at Trump's home, and that the Bureau's search will likely find evidence of obstruction. All this despite President Trump saying that he declassified all of the documents found in Mar-a-Lago. Approximately 20 of the 38 pages in the affidavit were either significantly or fully redacted, leaving more questions than answers regarding the justification for this raid. Last week on this program, Senator Marsha Blackburn spoke about the impact the raid has had on America.
We have seen the FBI become politicized, a certain group, a certain cabal in the FBI. People really fear this having two tiers of justice, two separate systems, rules for thee but not for me, that approach. And it is unnerving to Tennesseans, and we hear about this every single day, and how people want justice to be blind, to be equal, to be fair, and they're frustrated with what they see happening from the DOJ and the FBI.
Joining me now exclusively this morning with his first public reaction since the affidavit was unsealed is the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Mike Turner. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
I want to ask you about the affidavit. We just showed all of the redactments on that document. What do you react? How do you react to that? And do we know what these classified documents are in relation to?
Well, Maria, I think this is what's interesting about the affidavit. Even absent the redactions, what's missing in the allegations are that there's some imminent national security threat that would justify raiding the president's home. Former President Trump's home was raided, which is the most invasive manner in which the FBI could have gone about this. The Department of Justice could have had other options. They could have gone to court and tried to have the subpoena that they had enforced by the court. Instead, they chose to raid Mar-a-Lago. ago. In the affidavit itself, they cite the archivist. They don't cite the intelligence community. They don't cite the director of CIA, Department of Defense, or even the director of national intelligence as opining that these documents or this situation is a national security threat. They cite the archivist. So this sounds more like a bookkeeping issue than it is of a national security threat, which means it doesn't rise to the level of justifying raiding the former president's home.
So, in other words, the FBI did not ask the intelligence community for any assessment. I know that you notified Avril Haines, and you did get a note back from Avril Haines, the director of national intelligence. We have that letter here. And what this says is that they were unaware of it before this, and the director of national intelligence not aware. So the FBI did not ask the intelligence community at all about these documents before pulling off this raid.
Maria, it certainly appears that. When you look at Director Haynes' letter, she says, we'll begin the process. We'll begin to look at these records. And she cites both the records that had been surrendered by President Trump voluntarily and those that were taken in the raid itself. So clearly, she's saying they've not looked at these. They'll go look at them. We'll do an assessment. Well, that means that the FBI is flying alone here. Supposedly, they're looking for classified documents, but they're not talking to anybody who deals with classified information. And that would seem to indicate that this is very, very suspect as to why it would rise to the level of needing to raid. They had other options. They should have taken them.
Well, I mean, look, we go back and look at the Russia collusion lie that the FBI knew that the dossier was fake, and yet they still pushed forward trying to get warrants, FISA warrants, to spy on the Trump campaign, and that's exactly what they did. They spied on Carter Page for a year, and no charges were ever brought. What do you make of what the director of national intelligence may say in this briefing? First, tell us the timing. When do you expect to get a briefing from the DNI? When do you expect to get an assessment of all of this?
Well, they'll have to review the documents first before they come to Congress to brief us, which is the mystery part of this. Why haven't they been involved previously? There was another win also in court this weekend, Maria, and that is that former President Trump won in federal court. At least the court saying they have an initial intent to award a special master authority to go over these documents and to return to former President Trump those items that should not have been taken from his home, and also demanding that there be a more inclusive accounting of what was taken. Because, as you know, when they released supposedly their inventory, for example, his passports weren't there. So there's a number of items that we don't even know that they've taken. This win in court of the court saying their preliminary intent is to grant this special master really does show, once again, a court being very skeptical of what the FBI and the Department of Justice is doing.
Wow, but how aggressive. They also raided the home of the head of Project Veritas, because Project Veritas had their hands on the diary of Joe Biden's daughter. I mean, what is going on at the FBI?
Well, that certainly is another curious one, because that certainly doesn't rise to the level of any national security threat. This is, a diary, which, of course, certainly would be embarrassing to President Biden, embarrassing to his daughter. Certainly now we're learning that, the allegations that the diary itself had been stolen. But to go all the way to the level of not just subpoenaing the documents, but to raid a media outlet over this, again, is very, unprecedented. And it's a line that we've just not seen crossed before.
Meanwhile, when you take a look at what the FBI said about the capture of Zawahiri, let's talk about that for a moment, because we saw that they went out on TV and said that they were tracking the family. They declassified those documents. So how does that jive with this situation?
Well, that's really interesting, Maria, because if you look at what Director Haynes has said, the director of DNI, that she's going to review these documents and tell us what the risk would be if these documents were released. You can certainly identify any threat to national security with any information that's released. With Zawahiri here, the President Biden's administration released information about how he was found, how he was tracked, and how he was killed, all of which makes it more difficult for us to do those things in the future. And the payoff for them was really just bragging, as they were claiming credit for what had occurred. That certainly diminishes overall national security. So in all, we're going to be very, as we look at these statements that we're going to get from the directors, we look at these documents, and I've called for all the documents to be given to the Intelligence Committee so we can review them themselves. We have to be very cautious as we go through this process. There's a lot more to learn. I certainly think that the court's order to initially indicate that they have the inclination to issue a special master for the president, so President Trump's documents would go to the special master for review and for disposition. I think that certainly helps the former president.
Well, I mean, were these documents declassified?
Well, President Trump says they are. Certainly, Kash Patel has said they are. I mean, this is going to be a fact-based issue. Certainly, there's going to have to be some substantiation of this. But along the way, it's not. No one is questioning that President Trump had full authority to do that as president. The question is going to be, how can they document that it occurred?
So who directed the FBI then? I mean, who is in charge here? Is this the same group that oversaw Crossfire Hurricane and the efforts to take Trump down during the campaign over a lie being collusion? Do we know who directed the FBI to do this raid?
Well, Maria, that's what's going to be so important about this upcoming election in November. If the Republicans win the House, obviously, with that's going to include the investigatory powers that we're going to need to get to the bottom of this. We need to know who's directing these things at the FBI. Who decided to not use other options to obtain these documents and to raid former President Trump's home? Who decided to go to the media and say that there's disinformation from Russia coming out in the election? Stop reporting on these issues that might be damaging to candidate Biden. All of these things that we're seeing, they're coming from somewhere, and we need to get to the bottom of who is this and how do we root this out of the FBI so that we can get back to an organization, institution that we trust.
And we're going to talk with Senator Ron Johnson about that as well, because he's had conversations with whistleblowers. Before you go, Congressman, I've got to get your take on China, because now we've got news this weekend that the U.S. Coast Guard was denied entry into the Solomon Islands port, sparking concerns that China is running the region over there. It's in charge, saying that they own the South China Sea. What's your take on the threat of China?
This is very concerning because, Maria, this is a very provocative act. This is not just having an alliance with China. This is actually trying to impact us. We were coming back, according to reports, from an exercise that even included participation in the Solomon Islands themselves. So this provocative act certainly raises the bar. We've not seen this before within the area, and this is very concerning.
Okay, final question here on the Trump situation. Do you think Trump is going to get indicted? Are they going to go that far to stop him from running in 2024?
Maria, one of the things that I think is very concerning to everybody, besides just questions about the FBI's actions and the Department of Justice overreach, is this issue of unequal application of the law. It would be incredibly unusual for the Department of Justice to decide, when they didn't pursue former FBI Director Comey, when they didn't pursue Hillary Clinton, who had classified documents in her home with Bill Clinton, former president, to pursue President Trump over an issue with the archivist. So I think that's what's going to be very important about the special master being appointed. I think this is a big win for former President Trump if this court follows through, because this will give him an opportunity for the court, not just the Department of Justice, to take control of these documents and their final disposition.
Congressman, it's great to have you this morning. We so appreciate your time and your leadership on all of the above. Thank you, sir. House Intel Committee, a ranking member, Mike Turner, thank you. Quick break, and then President Biden's student loan plan and the impact it will have on an already red-hot inflation story. Florida Congressman Byron Donalds is here as we examine if it's fair for all taxpayers to be on the hook, even if they already paid off their loan or never took out a loan. That's next as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Future. Stay with us.
Mr. President, is this unfair to people who paid their student loans or chose not to take out loans?
Is it fair to people who, in fact, do not own multi-billion-dollar businesses to see why these guys give them all a tax breaks? Is that fair? What do you think?
Well, that was President Biden responding to millions of Americans who either do not have a student loan or have already paid off their student loan, even though inflation is hovering at a 40-year high. The White House claims that the student loan bailout will only cost $240 billion over 10 years. According to one estimate from the Penn Wharton unit, taxpayers will be on the hook for over $1 trillion. Another estimate from the Committee for a Responsible Budget has the price tag coming in between $440 and $600 billion. More spending, which has already stoked 40-year high inflation. Joining me right now is Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida. He sits on the House Budget Committee as well as the House Oversight and Reform Committee. Congressman, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
It's good to be back with you, Maria.
So why is the president forgiving all of this debt and obviously going to raise taxes on the rest of us to pay for this loan bailout? More spending after we've seen all of the spending in the last year and a half send inflation to 40-year highs.
The president's making this move because his approval numbers are in the toilet. He's trying to get his base out to vote. And so he's buying votes from people across the country. It is reckless. It's immoral. Frankly, it's illegal because the law that he is using is something for national emergencies that are declared by a president. Well, guess what, America? The national emergency that was COVID-19 is over. It does not exist. The president does not have the legal authority to do what he is doing. This is the complete wrong move, and it's going to make our inflation issues, which were caused by Joe Biden and the Democrats, it's going to make them significantly worse.
Well, that's a good point that you make, that he doesn't have the legal authority. How is it possible that he could go around Congress with more spending? I mean, you saw the estimate, some expecting this to cost $1 trillion. Somebody's got to pay for that. Who's paying for it?
Unfortunately, it's going to fall on the back of every taxpayer in the United States and also their children, because the truth is, in order to pay for this, you have to borrow the money. And we all know that we're just borrowing and future generations are going to have to pay this off. But this is also a gross violation of separation of powers. When you talk about a price tag, easily $500 billion, some estimates up to $1 trillion. That is a congressional issue because you either have to borrow those funds or you have to appropriate those funds. Congress has not discussed this proposal. Congress has not voted on this proposal. The president is using a statute that does not apply under this condition. That is why it's illegal. Congress should actually be going to court on this because it is a violation of separation of powers. Not to mention the different companies where this is their livelihood, actually getting these payments remade so that the debt can be paid down. They are people, I believe, have standing on this issue as well.
Well, I mean, the president has done this before. He goes around Congress. He blows off rulings from court orders about remain in Mexico at the border. A number of times we've seen this. So in other words, he went around Congress again for this. Will you be able to stop it?
I think that when we take back the House this fall, we definitely have measures that we can use. And this is why, for people listening across the country, the Senate elections in Arizona, in Nevada, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in New Hampshire, they really matter. Georgia as well, because you need a Senate and a House that's going to hold this White House accountable. Look at what's happening on our border. I know it's not our topic, but the president of the United States is completely ignoring federal law when it comes to immigration. We have fentanyl in our streets. We have 6 million people who have come across our borders in the last 20 months alone. It is outrageous. It must stop.
By the way, we're going to get back to the border. I'm going to take a short break. But real quick before that, is the FBI the overseer of these elections that you say are so important? Is the FBI in charge of ensuring that these elections are free and fair?
Well, I think that's really the responsibility of each one of these states. States have a responsibility to govern their elections as outlined by the Constitution. The FBI should only be involved if there are accusations of criminality and there need to be investigations.
All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I've got to get your take on crime spiking across the country as well. We're talking with Byron Donalds, and we'll be right back.
Conservative Republicans. I don't respect these MAGA Republicans. We're at a serious moment in our nation's history. The MAGA Republicans don't just threaten our personal rights and economic security. They're a threat to our very democracy. They refuse to accept the will of the people.
Wow, that was President Biden this week, once again attacking voters who support President Trump and the America First approach. The president has been trying to make the words "Make America Great Again" a dirty word. Now, for a year and a half, we are back with Florida Congressman Byron Donalds. Congressman, what do you make of this? The fact that the president is constantly attacking MAGA. He's trying to make MAGA appear extreme, and he keeps doing it. How is the support in the black community, for example, for MAGA and conservative voters?
I think what you're seeing across the country is you're seeing a lot of voters, black men, voters of Latin descent, Hispanic voters. They're starting to go down the America First line, the MAGA line, because what they want is an America that just works. They want an America where the political foolishness in Washington, D.C. is at an end. Joe Biden is the embodiment of political foolishness. He's been that way for 50 years. He cannot talk about his agenda because his agenda has been a failure. So this is why he has to try to talk about MAGA, as if somehow that's going to scare people away. Look, the one thing that we have to understand, everybody in America needs to see this. If you're truly concerned about the future of our country, if you're truly concerned about saving our democracy, you have to take it away from the Democrat Party, because this is the party that basically did this student loan bailout with no votes, no discussion, billions and billions of dollars. This is the party that's left the border wide open, fentanyl in our streets. This is the party that passed some Inflation Reduction Act, and they lied about the name. It's really a climate bill, and no member of Congress even had a chance to debate the measure. If you truly believe about democracy, shouldn't the members of Congress actually debate this stuff? They don't want to do that. They either want to run to the courts, they either want to do it with a quick vote where nobody sees what's in the legislation, or they want the president of the United States to issue an illegal order. You tell me what's more of a threat to democracy. I say it's Joe Biden.
Well, that's pretty extraordinary. And all the while, there is this massive dereliction of duty, a wide open border, inflation at 40-year highs, crime spiking across the country. And yet Merrick Garland is sending FBI agents to people's homes, not just President Trump, also Project Veritas, and a number of other people associated with Trump as well, who we don't talk about. But let's take one issue, and that is crime. Spiking across the country, up 37% in Chicago, 36% in New York City, 11% in Los Angeles, Seattle 14%, San Francisco up 8%. Why so much crime spiking across the country?
Crime is spiking because the Democrats in these cities do not hold people accountable. It's just that simple. Look, you have these district attorneys who will not prosecute. Last time I checked, the district attorneys in these cities and in some of these states, they're not supporting Donald Trump. They're not supporting Ron DeSantis. They support Joe Biden. They support Nancy Pelosi. They are the ones that don't want cities safe. They have demonized police all across the country, law enforcement officers who do their job with honor and with grace and with decency. And what the Democrats have tried to do to the American people is gaslight them with the images of an officer that does something wrong, another officer that might do something heinous, and try to paint all of law enforcement that way. That is why crime is up in our cities. We have to get back to law and order. You do not do that with liberal Democrat policy. You do that with conservative America First policy.
Meanwhile, you've got more than 2 million people having been apprehended at the border, another million gotaways in the country. What's the point of having this wide open border? And let me just point out this Gallup poll. There's a recent Gallup poll that finds a record number of Americans right now consider themselves suffering under Joe Biden as he allows all of these illegal migrants into the country. What's the end game here?
The end game is to turn them into U.S. citizens at some point with another one of these illegal DACA measures that Barack Obama did when he was in office. And so you kind of change the population. Look, in New York and California, they try to pass measures where non-citizens can vote. Why would you do that except you're trying to change the electorate and change the nature of the electorate so you can keep power? Federal immigration law and federal border security law is to protect the citizenry, not just from threats, but also to maintain the cohesion of America. When you have a president who flagrantly violates the law on purpose, not only is it unconstitutional, it's destructive of all of our cities, whether you live in a blue city or a red city, a blue state or a red state. Don't believe me? Go ask Eric Adams, who now wants federal support. What Eric Adams should be asking for is for Joe Biden to reverse course on his reckless border policy.
Well, for a long time, they've been talking about them being a sanctuary city. So what's the problem, Eric Adams? I thought this was a sanctuary city. Congressman, it's all very disturbing, and we are watching and keeping a spotlight on it. We so appreciate your time this morning. Byron Donald's joining us this morning in Florida. Thank you, sir. Quick break and then blowing the whistle on the FBI. Senator Ron Johnson is here with breaking news on what an FBI whistleblower told him was the directive inside the FBI about Hunter Biden's laptop. Plus, reaction to the media and big tech censorship. It's all right here and next. Stay with us.
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. And it turned out, after the fact, I mean, the fact checkers looked into it. No one was able to say it was false.
There you have it. That was Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg admitting on the Joe Rogan podcast that it was the FBI who called Facebook and likely Twitter and directed them to censor the exclusive story of Hunter Biden's influence peddling from the New York Post on Hunter Biden's laptop. This all happened just days before the 2020 presidential election. Both Facebook and Twitter clamped down on the explosive expose, with Facebook limiting the sharing of the story and Twitter suspending the account of the New York Post altogether. Meanwhile, the 51 former intelligence officials who signed a letter that claimed the laptop was Russian disinformation 5 days after the Post broke the story have yet to apologize or retract their statement. I had on this program John Ratcliffe, the then sitting director of national intelligence, who told us that is a lie and that the 51 who signed their name to this was wrong and that, in fact, it was not Russian disinformation. He told us that on this program and on Fox Business, Mornings with Maria. Senator Ron Johnson has been investigating the business dealings of the Biden family from day one, and he joins me right now. Good morning, Senator. Thanks very much for being here this morning.
Good morning, Maria.
Your reaction to what we heard from Mark Zuckerberg first.
Well, it's another piece of the puzzle of the politicization of these federal agencies. You know, the weaponization of federal agencies began under the Obama administration with Lois Lerner weaponizing the IRS against Obama's political opponents. And the partisanship, the politicization just continued. Let's say the exoneration of Hillary Clinton, the editing of James Comey's exoneration email. That was, by the way, that was the same cast of characters inside the FBI that then immediately went into Crossfire Hurricane. We now know that as early as October 2016, as certainly as January 2017, the FBI knew full well the Steele dossier was tainted with Russian disinformation. How do we know that? Because my staff uncovered the classified footnotes to the Pfizer report that completely contradicted the Pfizer report that said the FBI had no knowledge of Russian disinformation associated with the Steele dossier. So we see time and time again, partisanship. Look at the Peter Strzok, Lisa Page texts from 2016, 2017 that shows the partisanship. The Mueller probe never should have happened. In March of 2018, under Christopher Wray, the FBI, knowing full well that the Steele dossier was tainted with Russian disinformation, briefed Senate Intel and said the Steele dossier had integrity. So time and time again, we see the partisanship, partisan actions, political actions being undertaken by the FBI. Now, because we have whistleblowers coming forward, and I encourage more to come forward. One to Senator Chuck Grassley said that there was a scheme in August of 2020 to downplay the derogatory information around Hunter Biden to basically quash that investigation. That same month, on August 6th, both Senator Grassley and I, in the midst of our investigation on Hunter Biden, received an unsolicited briefing by the FBI, basically saying we are targeted disinformation. All of our investigation was based on U.S. persons and U.S. documents. Now, the briefing was completely unnecessary. I knew it was a setup. To this day, we do not know, even though we've asked repeatedly in public letters, who directed that briefing. The FBI, Merrick Garland has not come clean on that. And here's the point. 8 months later, 9 months later, they leaked that briefing to smear me to the Washington Post. So the most recent whistleblower to my committee has come. The whistleblowers have come forward and said that once they had that laptop, and again, it was offered to them in the summer of 2019. They finally subpoenaed and took possession in December 2019. But FBI leadership said, "quote, you will not look at that Hunter Biden laptop." Yeah. And also the FBI, quote, is not going to change the outcome of the election again. And then they proceeded to do so by suppressing that information, talking to people like Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, possibly Twitter, certainly Senator Grassley and I. That was certainly an effort to dissuade us from continuing our investigation.
Yeah. So there's a lot here. On the one hand, you're saying that they briefed you unsolicited, the FBI did, and you think that was a setup. They wanted to brief you, saying you are a target of Russia so that they could leak that. Well, we briefed Senator Johnson and we told him he was a target. That's one thing that you just said. And the other thing was about that whistleblower complaint. We have the letter that you sent to Inspector General Michael Horowitz, and you sent him a letter saying whistleblowers have contacted my office to share serious concerns about the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We pull out one quote here in this letter, which is the quote that you just mentioned, and that is that the whistleblower told you there was a directive within the FBI. FBI leadership told employees you will not look at that Hunter Biden laptop because we will not affect an election. The FBI is not going to change the outcome of the election again. While telling the FBI not to look at the Hunter Biden laptop, they are, in fact, efforting to change the election.
Well, absolutely. The fact that the Hunter Biden laptop was censored by Twitter, Facebook, we've seen polls that show that had the American public known the corruption of the Biden family and Hunter Biden, Joe Biden would not be president. We wouldn't have open borders. We wouldn't have 40-year high inflation, record gas prices, rising crime. All these disastrous results of the Biden administration, Democrat governance wouldn't have happened but for the FBI's politicization, their partisanship, and their suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop. Again, they had it in December 2019 and did nothing with it.
Well, and let's point out that at that time, President Trump was being impeached for a phone call that he had with the head of Ukraine. And here we have all of that information on the laptop that the FBI has about the $1 million that Hunter Biden was collecting from Ukraine and Burisma for being on their board.
You know, Maria, after Senator Grassley and I issued our report the next day, Mr. McIsaac, the computer repair shop owner, offered us that laptop. Now, we'd already been falsely accused of soliciting, disseminating Russian disinformation, so we did our due diligence. We contacted the FBI. They didn't tell us anything. We repeatedly talked to them. What do you know about this? They would never admit that they had it. Now we know they had December 2019, sat on it. Mr. McIsaac got impatient, turned that over to the New York Post. The rest is history. But then the New York Post story was also suppressed. Think about what FBI involvement was there in that letter by the 51 intelligence operatives or former officials? How is that all connected? You know, that's something that we need to investigate. We need to find out how that letter was, how that was proposed, who drafted it. Were they in contact with the same FBI officials that were trying to suppress this Hunter laptop information?
Yeah, well, this matters greatly because when we don't see accountability, when we don't actually see wrongs being righted, the American people will continue to distrust and question. And that was part of what went on in 2020 as well. People were questioning, well, can we trust them? We know what they just did in the Russia collusion hoax. Real quick, your election right now in Wisconsin, you say they are interfering in your election because of these smears on you. Let's take a look at where you stand in Wisconsin. Tell me about your opponent and why you believe you right now are being smeared. And this is the result. 50% for Barnes, 46% for Johnson in the Wisconsin Senate race.
Well, again, because of their suppression, they absolutely interfered in the 2020 election far greater than anything Russia or China could ever do. And yes, by leaking that briefing, basically saying I'm a tool of Russia, which I am not, a completely false accusation, the Wisconsin press picks that up. And there are people in Wisconsin think I'm a tool of Vladimir Putin. Nothing could be further from the truth, but they have smeared me publicly, and they just might impact the 2022 election here in Wisconsin as well. Because let's face it, Marie, Maria, they do not want me reelected because I would be chairman of the permanent subcommittee on investigations. They know I will investigate their corruption. So Ron Johnson for Senate.com, I'm going to need a lot of help. They've already spent more than $50 million smearing me. And, of course, the FBI is part of that process.
All right. Is there anything you want to say about your opponent?
Well, he's the most radical leftist the Democrats could have absolutely chosen. He wants to defund the police. He wants to abolish ICE. He supports all these disastrous policies that are creating so much pain for Americans.
Thank you, Senator. All right, Senator, good to talk with you. We'll be watching and keeping a spotlight on it. Senator Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. We'll be right back with J.D. Vance.
There's probably a greater likelihood the House flips than the Senate. Senate races are just different. They're statewide. Candidate quality has a lot to do with the outcome. Right now we have a 50-50 Senate in a 50-50 country. But I think when all is said and done this fall, we're likely to have an extremely close Senate, either our side up slightly or their side up slightly.
And that was Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, lukewarm on the chances that Republicans will take control of the upper chamber this November. The latest Fox News Senate power rankings show 5 races are up in the toss-up category, with 15 seats solidly for Republicans, 3 leaning, and 2 likely for the GOP. One of those races Republicans are very optimistic about winning is in Ohio, where Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Ryan are vying to replace retiring Republican Rob Portman. In the latest poll from the Trafalgar Group, Vance holds a nearly 5-point lead over Ryan with 71 days to go until the midterms. This poll comes to us from Trafalgar, and they will release this widely today. This has not been out there yet. Joining me right now is Ohio Senate Republican candidate J.D. Vance. He is also the author of the best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. Great to see you, J.D. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So how would you characterize your race right now? What is most important to the Ohio voters, in your view?
Yeah, Maria, I think we're in a really good spot here in Ohio. You know, the problem that my Democratic opponent, Tim Ryan, has is that he tries to be one thing on his TV commercials, but his voting record and his public statements just don't back it up. And so, you know, on the one hand, he criticizes mildly Joe Biden's debt forgiveness plan for college students. On the other hand, he voted for the exact same thing 2 years ago. And you can't just flip-flop on every position that you've held over the last 2 years and expect people to take it seriously. So I think we're in a good spot against Tim Ryan, but we got a lot of work to do. And I think we have to make sure that Ohio voters actually get out there and vote, because if they don't, we're gonna put a guy who's supported defund the police and supported these inflationary policies into the Senate from Ohio. And we deserve to have a good senator from Ohio, not a rubber stamp for Joe Biden.
A political action committee with close ties to McConnell is launching a $28 million advertising campaign in Ohio beginning on Labor Day. I know that there's been nonstop ads for Tim Ryan. Do you feel support from the GOP and from Mitch McConnell?
You know, I think it's really important for Republicans to unite. You know, I won the primary. Not everybody was happy in the Republican establishment that I won the party, but I did. And I think that it's time for us all to unite. And certainly I'm very happy to see some of the national Republican groups coming into the state, because the national Democratic groups and donors have been behind Tim Ryan the entire summer. The only reason this guy has even a little bit of a chance is because he's been parading these TV commercials around with unlimited national money, pretending that he's something that he's not. We've just got to tell the truth about him. And I think both our campaign and also the National Party is going to do that in the next couple of months, which is one of the reasons why I'm so confident about where we are.
All right, I want to continue the conversation and get your take on the American people. We've got polls that show a majority of people say they're either suffering or believe that this country is headed in the wrong direction. We'll continue our conversation with Ohio Senate Republican candidate J.D. Vance after this short break. Stay with us. Well, welcome back, and we are back with Ohio Senate candidate J.D. Vance. And, J.D., it's surprising to me that the Republicans are not doing better in the Senate polling that we see, given that everywhere you look, there's another fire to be put out. We've talked about crime and inflation this morning, and certainly corruption, but there's also this wide-open border. You have to believe that this is a real dereliction of duty now that 2 million people have been apprehended. Another 1 million people have gotten away. We don't know their intentions. And then, of course, there's the illicit drugs coming through. Your thoughts on the impact on Ohio?
Well, it's hugely negative, Maria. And this is one of the things that really bothers me about Tim Ryan. You know, he says he stands for the working man. But what about millions of illegal migrants coming across the border and competing with working people for their jobs? What about the fact that Ohio is the third leading state when it comes to opioid overdose deaths? You know, these guys say that we've got to show compassion for illegal migrants, and of course we do, but let's show some compassion for our own citizens. Let's actually secure the border so that we don't have 100,000 Americans dying of fentanyl overdoses. Joe Biden and Tim Ryan have basically turned the U.S. southern border into the drug and sex trafficking capital of the world. We have got to shut this down. And Maria, I think Republicans have got to be more aggressive about this stuff. People can go to jdvance.com to support me, but we can't run away from the border issue because it's making our country poorer. It's making our country less safe. And we've got to hang this stuff around the Democrats' necks because it's their fault. If they made better decisions, if Joe Biden and Tim Ryan wanted to secure the border, they could. The fact that they're not shows how little they care about people in Ohio and all across the country.
Well, we were just showing pictures of when I visited the border a couple of weeks ago for the 5th time, and I went to the Texas Crimes Lab, where they get the guns and the drugs that they have seized, and it was absolutely extraordinary. And I have not heard Joe Biden mention the word fentanyl once, unbelievably. We will be watching your race, J.D. Thanks very much for being here this morning, and we appreciate your time. Ohio Senate candidate J.D. Vance. That'll do it for us for Sunday Morning Futures. Have a great Sunday, everybody. You can watch us again today on Fox News at 3 p.m. Stay with us.